Hi, welcome to another video development tip. Today we're going to look at how to set up EF Core scaffolding from an existing database. We're going to start from a very clean project and just go through the very basics of how to do this. So right now in Azure Data Studio, I'm going to create a new database and then use it. So we're going to create existing scaffold right here. We're going to say use this database, create one table called order with an ID as an integer and primary key with the name and total. The name is in varchar and it cannot be null. And then we're going to create another table called item. We're going to have an int primary key again, a name, and an order ID. The order ID is actually going to reference, to be a foreign key reference to the order, which is going to create a one-to-many relationship. And we're going to look at how that scaffold is in EF Core when we create it. After that, we're just going to insert two rows, one into order and one into item, and put this as our dummy data. So let's run this, and we should see our database created. Alright, so if I go over here and refresh the databases, you'll see existing scaffold. Let's do a select top 1000 on order, and we should see one result, and we did. Okay, now that we have our database, let's go ahead and go into VS Code and actually create a web API, add everything we need, and then create our scaffold. So right now I'm just going to do a .NET new. So I'm going to use the .NET CLI to create a new web API. We're going to call it existing DB scaffolding. What this is due to setting up a project. It's pretty similar to how you would do new project in Visual Studio or other IDEs. So it says it created, so let's go ahead and change directory into the project. As you can see, we have our CS project and everything. Let's go ahead and open it in code. Alright, here we go. So we have a pretty standard project. As you can see, we're just pretty basic, no surprises here. It's a standard new project, has a values controller. Let's look at the CS project. So we have our ASP.NET Core.app, which is going to give us most of the packages we need. So with that, Entity Framework is already there, but since we are using SQL Server, we actually need that provider. So what we're going to do is use the CLI again. We're going to do a .NET add package, Microsoft.entity, can't spell, framework core.SQL server. What it's going to do is add that NuGet package to our project. As you can see, it should reload, and right here on line 11, we have Microsoft.entity framework core.SQL server. This is a provider for our database, for our pack. So let's go ahead and do a .NET restore, just to be safe, to make sure we have it. Okay. Now, what we can do is we can look at the .NET EF scaffold, DB context scaffold, and let's see what this really takes in. I didn't do -h on it. So let's do a help on it. As you can see, it takes in the connection to the database and the provider. That was the NuGet package we just installed. So let's go ahead and do this. So let me do a .NET EF. Here, let me bring this more to the middle of the screen. That won't work actually. DB .NET EF DB context. So you can see it takes in the connection. So let's do a scaffold, and let's do the connection. As you can see, the scaffold, I'm just doing server localhost, my port, what database I'm using, my user and password for this local database, and then the provider, Microsoft Entity Framework.SQL server. And I'm using the -c option, which is the context name. I want it to be called existing DB context, and then the output directory -o. I want everything to go in the data folder. So if we run this, what should happen is it will make a connection to our database, it will build our project, and then create the context and all the entities we need, and all the configurations also, all our constraints, foreign key relationships, etc. Let's go ahead and run this. So we have a pretty small database. It shouldn't take too long for this to, yep, okay, it's done. As you can see over in Explorer, we have a data folder now. So let's go see what this created for us. First, let's look at the context. Let me close our command window or terminal. As you can see, it gives a pretty basic context we inherit from DB context, and we have two constructors, one that passes options through to the base and an empty one. We have two DB sets, which are our two tables, item and order. And then we also have this on configuring. We will want to get rid of this, because what we're doing right here is we're saying this context use SQL Server in this connection string. What we're going to do instead is we're actually going to pull this out into the container, so for dependency injection. And ideally what you should do is you should probably put this into like an app settings.json or something like that to bring in, so you can have different databases per environment, things like that. So what it also created was our on-model creating. So this is what sets up all the relationships and constraints, things like that. I actually have another video on this talking about how to clean this up, because if you imagine you have 10 tables and a lot of properties, this method can get very long and very hard to read. So ideally what we can do is we can break off each of these entities into their own configuration files. I have a link for that video in the description and a little information button somewhere on the screen. But let's just look what it created for us. So if we look at item, let's go look at what that script should have done for us. So in item we have an integer primary key, a name that cannot be null, order ID that references the primary key in the table order. So if we look at this entity, we have name that is required, and it has one order, and this order has many items and has a foreign key order ID. And here's a constraint name. So if you have custom constraint names in your database, it will take those and put it right here. Similar thing for order, name is required, and setting that up. So let's look at the entities it created. First one was item. It took all the properties and pretty much exactly what you'd expect. Has an ID, which is integer, a string, name, and a nullable integer. So if you remember, we didn't say there had to be a reference to the order. And then a reference to the object order. So this would be the ID of this one. So if you look at order, what it created was the ID, name, and a nullable integer for total. As you remember, it was we didn't put not null on there. And then a collection of items. So what it does is when you say, dot include item, it will actually go through there and grab the relationship and populate this collection for you. What it also did was it, in the constructor, set it to a empty hash set, which nice about this is you don't actually have to worry about null collections. It'll either be empty or there'll be items. You don't have to worry about null collections. I actually have a video on this also, using this for view models and other models. I'll have a link in the description for that and another button somewhere for that also. So now that we have everything what it looks like, let's go ahead and pull out this option builder.use SQL Server. So I'm going to cut this and remove this method. What we're going to do is we're going to go into our startup, and we're going to say services.add DB context. What context we want to add? We want to add the existing DB context. We'll need to add our using for that. And what we're doing here is we're going to say what options we want to use. So I'm going to paste that little line I stole from the other method. And this will freak out because we don't have the using for this either. And we're saying when we ask for this context, or when you go to create this context, here's the SQL Server provider we're going to use. So in all my other dev tips, I have this in a JSON file. So if you want to see how that works, just go look at any of the other projects in the repo, and you can easily pull this out and put it into a application settings.json. But for now, we're just going to leave it here just for out of scope of this video. Now that we have that, what we can do is let's test out this connection, make sure everything works. Alright, so what I'm going to do here is add a constructor and dependency inject what we just did in the container. So what I need to do is say what context we want, existing DB context. What I'm going to do is add the using and then initialize the field context. We can make it read only because we're only initializing it in the constructor. So what we can do is inside this get, what we're going to do instead is we're going to return the orders. So return context dot order dot as node tracking, and then we need to add that using for the node tracking dot to list. Alright, so I need to actually fix this. We are returning IEnumerable of order, and what we actually had to do to get around this is inside the order class they make it a partial, but just for this demo I'm going to make it just a regular class. You really shouldn't be returning the entity straight to the client. You usually want to separate out that layer and make a view model for it, but just for ease of demo we're just going to go along with this. Now that I have everything, let's go ahead and run this. So let's go do a .NET run. This will actually break because I'm forgetting one thing. Since I'm returning the entity right away and not using a view model, which I should be using, there's a reference to the object from the object. It's like a circular thing going on. So what we need to do just for this is on the app.use MVC, we need to add JSON options to say ignore the loop going on. Or is that on here? Let's see. It's actually on the services.add MVC. Let me paste this and tell it to reformat my document. All we're saying is add JSON options. Reference is ignore the loop handling, otherwise it will break. Obviously your view models aren't going to be exactly the same as your entities, so that shouldn't really be a problem when you actually do this all the way correctly. Let's do a .NET run. Alright, we're listening on port 5000, so let's go to the browser and let's hit the controller, API/values. Alright, you can see we got our first row. Alright, test order total 300, but our items are empty. What's causing that actually is if we go back to the controller, and I'm going to show you another thing. We're going to do a .NET watch run instead this time, and when I make this edit, it will pick it up and apply it. So, it's as no tracking in the order, I need to include the order.item. So now when I save this, you'll see that we are starting our app again, and once it's started, we'll go back to, here we go, we'll back to the browser. Now you should see item should have an item in it. I forgot to save the startup, so this is the error that I was talking about. It references a self-referencing loop. So if I save this time, .NET watch run will pick it up, and let's go try again. Alright, as you can see, our item actually has an item in it this time. So that should be everything you need to get off the ground and running with the existing database and creating the scaffolding in EF Core. If you thought this was helpful, like the video. If you think it'll help other people, share it to other people. Follow me on Twitter if you want to leave feedback at alwill_.net. That will be in the description. Thanks for watching.